Hello! Welcome to the Rigolini Report. I'm your host, Chris Rigolini, Director of Bands at the Highlands Ranch High School, and today's episode is entitled The Importance of Transcriptions. Before we get into all that, let me give you a couple of updates from around the community. No word yet on Governor Polis's decision on the end of the school year. He's set a date of April 11th to make that decision. Let's hope that he makes it and the leadership make that decision sooner than later so we know what's going on at the end of the school year. Until we do find out, continue to check your Google Classroom sites, your email, and of course any district notifications that come out on the matter. We will be continuing classes online until we hear word from the governor. So for now, enjoy your time at home and enjoy this new opportunity of online learning. Something else I have for you, the mattress fundraiser that was postponed from March 28th is back on. We are going to be pushing out the website information and moving all of the mattress fundraiser to an online fundraiser. On Monday, we will release this information. We'll get the website to you and a code that you can type in upon checkout to make sure that Highlands Ranch gets credit for the sale. Now, students, I know you're wondering about the cash prize that is offered by Tony the Mattress Guy and his company. There's a place there for people to type in your name as well, so that you get credit for the sale. So don't worry, that's all still in place. We'll be running our online mattress fundraiser for 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, anybody from around the nation and really around the world can help support the music program at Highlands Ranch. So go out there and sell some mattresses and look for those updates coming out very soon. Again, we'll start that on Monday and run that for 2 weeks. Now, before we go any further, we have a new joke of the day. This joke is brought to you by Maddie from the trumpet section. How many trumpet players does it take to screw in a light bulb? 1, to hold the light bulb while the world revolves around them. Thank you, Maddie, for that wonderful joke. If you would like to submit your joke to have it presented on the Rigolini Report, just email me. I've been collecting jokes from students and parents alike, and I look forward to reading them every day. So keep them coming. Now, today's episode is about the importance of transcriptions. Before we get into transcriptions, what they are and how they work, we have to understand a little bit about wind band repertoire and where wind bands came from. When I say wind bands, I'm including all bands that sit down in a concert setting and play music. So we're talking about wind ensembles, symphonic bands, and concert bands of all kinds. They all fall under the umbrella of wind bands and perform what we call wind band music. The history of wind bands in this country goes all the way back to military bands, to drum and fife corps that were used to communicate across battlefields. Now, from that military tradition, college bands started forming. The first college band to form in the United States was at the University of Notre Dame. That's right, the Band of the Fighting Irish were formed in 1845 and first performed at a football game in 1887. When the Band of the Fighting Irish formed, as with many university bands around the country, they were underneath the umbrella of the ROTC program. Bands weren't moved into the music program until much later in the 20th century. As bands in the early part of the 20th century started to move into a concert setting, we found them performing simply military marches and transcriptions, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. It wasn't until 1950 or so when wind bands started getting their own repertoire, when modern composers, when contemporaries of the day were writing specifically for that ensemble. The man credited as the catalyst for this change was named Frederick Fennell, who in 1952 established the Eastman Wind Ensemble. The Eastman Wind Ensemble was formed at the Eastman School of Music at the University of Rochester in New York. He was the conductor and the director of the Eastman Wind Ensemble for 10 years and completely changed the landscape of wind band music while he was there. He was commissioning new works for wind band. He was still keeping Sousa marches alive and our march tradition alive. He was bringing old classics back to the forefront. Pieces like the Holtz suites, E-flat, the first suite in E-flat and the second suite in F, as well as pieces like Lincolnshire Posy. He was asking contemporary composers to write specifically for wind band. It completely changed the way the world looked at wind band and brought it into the forefront. Now, since Eastman, wind bands have popped up all over, mostly in school settings and university settings. There are very few professional wind band groups in the world. Now, let's get into what a transcription is and how it functions. There's a couple of definitions that we need to know before we move forward. The definition of a transcription, as written in the Encyclopedia Britannica, is the adaptation of a composition for an instrument or instruments other than those for which it was originally written. That means taking a piece of music written for one group of instruments and moving it to a different group of instruments. Now you might be thinking to yourself, how is this different than an arrangement? Well, the difference between a transcription and an arrangement is that a transcription tries to hold true to the original intent of the composer. So for example, a transcription won't change any of the rhythms, won't change the chordal progression or the chords underneath the melody, where an arranger has free range to do so. They can make pieces harder, or in most cases, more simple for younger groups to perform. They can change the melody, they can move the chords underneath the melody, they can change the rhythm of the melody to make it more simple. Arrangers have much more freedom, where transcribers try and take the exact piece, the exact notes and rhythms, and just move them to different instruments. What ends up happening is instruments in the original piece are given a counterpart in the new transcription. So for example, the first violin part might be transcribed into a clarinet part. The cello part might be transcribed into euphonium or a low reed part. Some examples of transcriptions from the early part of the 20th century, and I'm going to consider this anything before 1950 that would have been performed before the Eastman Wind Ensemble. Some early examples from the world of transcriptions might be Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Bach. This was written in 1705, and there's been many, many transcriptions since. The transcription that I'm referring to was written in 1942 by Dr. Eric Lietzen, whose name will come up later in the program. He's known for being a prolific writer of transcriptions. The recording you're about to hear is the University of North Texas Wind Ensemble performing Huntsberger's 1998 transcription of Bach's Toccata and Fugue. You can hear in this recording how the organ part, for which the Toccata and Fugue was originally written for, is so easily moved to the wind band setting. That's because an organ is made up of pipes that have air moving through them, much like our wind instruments. And in fact, a lot of those pipes, if you don't understand how an organ works, we pull what are called stops to tell which pipes to play on the organ. A lot of those pipes are shaped to sound like band instruments. Some of them are conical, so they sound like horns or trumpets. Some of them have reeds inside, so they sound like clarinets or oboes or bassoons. So taking Bach's organ music and transcribing that directly to the wind band is a match made in heaven. It's perfect for that. Another really famous example of a piece that is played more often by wind bands now than by orchestral musicians today is Wagner's Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral, written in 1850 for his opera Lohengrin. Now, this part of the opera happens at the very end of the second act when Elsa is on her way to the cathedral to be married. Now, this arrangement of it was written by Calais. It was written in 1938, and like I said, is still performed today. This is the transcription that people perform. Take a listen as the President's Own Marine Band performs Calais' 1938 transcription of Wagner's Elsa's Procession to Cathedral. Isn't that glorious? Now, I only played you the very end of this piece, and most of that brass writing was original to Wagner's orchestral score, and that's why it works so well for wind band. A couple other examples of Dr. Eric Liedzin's transcriptions that are of more famous orchestral works from the early part of the 20th century is Pictures at an Exhibition by Modest Mussorgsky. This piece was written in 1874, and the transcription was written in 1942. Another one is the William Tell Overture. William Tell Overture, of course, was written by Rossini for his opera, William Tell. It is the overture to the opera. And Dr. Eric Liedzin wrote a transcription in 1938. That transcription is still performed to this day.